I'm working on this 1961 wheel horse, model 401. In the last video, I got the clutch working properly and advanced the timing a little by changing the point gap. That got it running a little better. Now I want to change the throttle to make it easier to control. Normally on these old Kohlers that came on a wheel horse, you would attach the throttle cable to that little disc as I did on this one. That's because from 1955 through 1960, wheel horse used some type of lever for the throttle control. From 1955 through 1959, it bolted on the hood and looks kind of like this one. In 1960, the levers came through the hood under the steering wheel. Here's one from my junk box, so you can see the side of the lever. In both cases, you had mechanical advantage due to the location of the pivot point on the lever. The cable moved less than half the distance that your fingers did when you moved the lever from idle speed to full throttle. So this little disc worked just fine with those levers. In 1961, they changed to the push-pull throttle cables, so that lost the mechanical advantage of the lever. If they used the same disc, it would have limited throttle knob travel and be hard to set the engine speed where you want at mid-range, like this tractor. So I went and checked some random person's wheel horse collection, and I found two examples of 1961 401s with this big odd-shaped plate on there instead of the normal round disc. If you use that odd-shaped plate and connect the throttle wire in this outer hole here, it's farther away from the pivot point, giving you more leverage. And that gives you back that normal throttle travel when you have a push-pull throttle. So this is the type of plate that you need if you have that push-pull type throttle. I don't have any extra plates like that, and it would take a while to make one. If I measure to the hole I want to use, it's about 1 1/4 inches from the center of this shaft to that hole. Here's some other Kohler governor discs. They were made for tractors with push-pull throttle knobs. This one is an original Kohler part. They just added an arm on there to extend the hole out to where they wanted it. If I measure from the center of the disc to the hole on the arm, it's about 1 1/4 inches. The same distance from center as that big plate with all the holes. The location of that arm matters. This feature where the spring goes in will be towards the right. That puts this arm pointing up. Here's a few that I made. They would have been for a 702 or 753 type of tractor. On this 401 that I'm working on, I think the arm will come out on the left side. Here's an arm I have made already. It just needs to be welded in the right position. And that'll put the hole about 1 1/4 inches from center. Here's a disc with the arm welded on. It's not the same disc. I used one from my junk box that didn't have good original paint on it. The arm is angled upward from horizontal because I want the hole in the same place as the hole in that original plate. I painted this because it looks better than it would if it was rusty. I didn't video me taking this apart because I expected to show the new part on there and working next. But I realized that you have to adjust the governor to do this, and some people might want to see that part. I need to get the shaft through this brass part without pushing the shaft back into the block. Now this arm has to go behind the nut before you tighten it. The big arm should be clamped by the nut. The shaft should move freely, and the disc should turn freely. Next, this little snap ring goes on there. It holds the shaft in the right place. If you have the brass nut screwed in and the shaft pulled all the way out, you'll see the groove just outside the brass nut. You can loosen the nut some to adjust the big arm behind the nut, but if you unscrew the nut too far, it'll force the snap ring out of the groove. I'm going to put this big arm down about where it was and tighten the nut. Make sure the disc can float freely after the nut's tight, and if it don't, make sure the disc is flat. And sometimes the brass nut gets mashed from over tightening and needs to be replaced just to get your disc to float. The shaft has to move freely. Next comes the arm. The straight end of the spring goes into this hole, and the spring body lines up with this hole, so the spring windings go over the shaft. When this goes on, this bent end of the spring has to be in the slot on the disc. I'm going to hook the top of this arm to the carburetor linkage. Line up the spring in that slot back there and put the arm on the shaft. But this arm don't go on the shaft, and I pushed too hard, so that just pushed the snap ring out of the groove. This arm is pinched together in the back. I need to spread that gap some. The gap on this is completely mashed closed, so I'm going to wedge this scraper in from the back side. That's stuck in there pretty hard. I need another tool. That's probably enough there. The gap is almost parallel. It fits through one side and not the other. That hole's distorted on one side. I need to fix that problem first. I have a drill bit that's the same size as the shaft. I'll use that to see if I fixed it yet. And I have this little tapered file that just happens to be the right size for this hole. That helped it pretty quickly. I'm going to keep filing until I don't see that bump there that was interfering. That fits on there easy now. The bolt and the nut go on first, with the washers in place. The straight end of this spring goes in the hole, and rotate the spring until the windings line up with the shaft hole. I'll connect the top of the arm to the carburetor linkage. Line up the spring with the slot and slide the arm on the shaft. I'm going to tighten the bolt until this fits better on the shaft. There, it's got a good hold on the shaft. I'll loosen it a bit so I can adjust it. That feels good there. Nothing's binding. Make sure there's a gap in there between the arm and the brass nut. You're establishing the position of the arm when you tighten the bolt. The point is to clamp the governor shaft and the carburetor linkage together when they're both at the full throttle position. I'll put the first wrench on top so I can push down on the bolt head. That rotates the linkage arm counterclockwise to the full throttle position. Next, I'll use some pliers to grip the shaft. I want to rotate it counterclockwise until I feel it's against the stop. That's the full throttle position for the governor shaft. When I think I have both parts rotated to stop in the counterclockwise direction, I hold down on the top wrench, which keeps those parts held in that position while I tighten the nut with the bottom wrench. Just tighten the bolt until it has a good grip on the shaft. You don't want to distort the arm too much. I'm going to grip the shaft and make sure I can't move the arm. Now all this stuff should move easily, and the spring should work in both directions. I'm going to push the throttle knob to the idle position because you want everything in the idle position when you make this connection. On this mechanism, idle position is up. When I connect this cable to the small arm, the anchor point should line up on the big arm. These clamps have a little tab inside that fits into the groove of the cable jacket. It keeps the cable from slipping in the clamp. When you rotate the clamp, it screws up and down the cable jacket like a nut. I'm going to adjust it until the cable holds the carburetor linkage almost against the idle screw. When it's connected, I want to be able to flop this arm a little bit to verify the cable's not forcing the carburetor against the idle screw. That's the governor's job. The governor will push the linkage against the idle screw when the engine starts. That should be it. I'll just move it through its operating range here. When you go back to idle position, verify the arm isn't forced against the idle screw. One thing I noticed on this one, The cable travel is limited by this arm hitting the outer jacket. That's not a problem unless it limits the engine's RPM too much. Now you're looking at the throttle knob, and I'm going to measure how far it travels. It looks like it's moving about 1.5 inches now. Previously it was moving about 3/4 of an inch. Here's a before and after picture, so that's a good improvement. Okay, let's see what happens. It's been sitting for a week. I wonder if all that smoking is fouling up the spark plug. It still dies if you give it gas too fast, but I have a lot more control now, and it's easier to give it gas slowly. Well, that's as far as I'm going this time, and here's what it looks like. There's still a few problems to be fixed, and I'm not sure what I'm going to work on next. We still have some local tractor shows this year, and I'm going to add this one to our display of antique wheel horse tractors. Alright, that's it.